Annals of Arithmancy, Chapter 13, World Travelers. Disclaimer: there's a million mysteries Hermione's ready to unravel. Come on, let's travel the world of J.K. Rowling. 3rd of May, 2002. Harry's and Ginny's baby wasn't born on the 1st of May, but he was born on the 3rd. It was a memorable experience for all involved. Ginny coped with her labor pains in part by projecting them to Harry. Harry fainted on the spot. He claimed he was taken by surprise, but she said that didn't excuse the second time it happened. Still, the birth went smoothly with the delivery of a 7-pound, 12-ounce baby boy. The date meant that Fleur was still pushing for her choice of name, but Ginny put her foot down. Harry led the family into the delivery room, in controlled quantities, it was a big family, and told them, "Weasleys, I am proud to present James Victor Potter."
"Oh, he's beautiful!"
Molly cooed.
"He is," Ginny said, "although he has Harry's nose, unfortunately."
"Worse than that," Harry said. "I think he has my dad's nose, but he looks like he'll have Ginny's eyes, so it should balance out." Ginny gave him a look.
"His eyes are blue. Oh, the shape."
She read his thoughts.
"All babies have blue eyes, dear," Molly said. "He does look rather like you when you were born."
"Say, I've just thought of something," George said. "James and Morgan will be going to Hogwarts at the same time." They had woken the morning after the raid on Barty Crouch to learn that Tonks had had her baby too. There were an awful lot of spring birthdays in this family, Hermione reflected. Morgan Lupin, a girl for now. She looked a bit different from Sasha, and they weren't sure she'd inherited a full share of her mother's gift, but time would tell. It did imply something interesting about the genetics of metamorphs, though.
"George!" Ginny whined. "He was just born! You don't need to talk about Hogwarts yet." "Not to mention the two of them will be there at the same time as Sasha," Hermione deadpanned. "Hogwarts may not survive." 15th of May, 2002. Harry rubbed his eyes, hoping the dark circles didn't show too badly. "You really didn't pick the best time, Mr. Spudmore," he said. "I have a 2-week-old baby to care for, and I'm not expecting to be doing much of anything in public for a while." "I do apologize, Mr. Potter," said Randall Spudmore. "We wanted to track a full season's worth of sales first, and then we did some of our own testing, and then there was that unfortunate business with Barty Crouch. But the Quidditch World Cup is only 2 months away, so we wanted to contact you as soon as possible."
"Right," Harry groaned. "And you want me to do a detailed study of what's wrong with the firebolt Millennium? I mean, I told you what problems I had with it when it first came out."
"Ah, yes." Spudmore checked his notes. "Poor handling, hair-trigger steering. You felt it didn't have the strong control of the original."
"It doesn't, unless you've changed it," he said.
"So you say, but that is hardly a scientific assessment. The Millennium is a precision piece of equipment, and if we had an accurate study of what the problem was, we could try to fix it."
Harry nodded, conceding the point. He tried to think of what kinds of tests he could do. Spudmore would surely have some in mind, but he wouldn't need to approach Harry except for his own flying skill and his own tests, or possibly name recognition. It wasn't coming to him, but he did think of something else. "Sorry, Mr. Spudmore," he said. "My head isn't really in it. But I think Hermione said something about this ages ago. I could call her and see if she's at home if you want."
"Oh, if she's willing to talk to me, I'd be honored, Mr. Potter," he said.
"All right." Harry got up and went to the flue. Calling Hermione's and George's flat, he stuck his head through the fireplace.
"Harry!" Hermione jumped up from the sofa. "What's happening? Is something wrong?"
She was still on edge from the past few months. No, he said. "It's just Randolph Spudmore from the Firebolt Corporation showed up at my door."
"Firebolt?"
"Firebolt?" George repeated as his head popped into view. "Yeah, he wanted me to do a study on why the Millennium is such a piece of rubbish."
"Wait, what?" "He said that," Hermione said.
"Well, not exactly," Harry clarified, "but that's basically what he meant.
Hermione, I was wondering if you could help?
Tell him it's too fast, she said.
Harry blinked.
G-forces? Centrifugal force? She said. I told you this when you got your first firebolt.
I know, that's why I called you, but it's been a while and I haven't got enough sleep for this.
Hermione sighed resignedly, understanding that she'd have to explain it herself. But then a smile formed on her face. George, she said sweetly, you might want to come along. I think you'll want to see this. A few minutes later, Hermione and George stepped out of the flue at 12 Grimmauld Place, Sirius's wedding present to Harry and Ginny. He hadn't wanted his old house, so he'd left it to Harry to fix it up. After some aggressive cleaning and a bit of remodeling, it looked much homier. Hermione shook the broom-maker's hand. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Spudmore, she said. Likewise, Professor Granger and Mr. Weasley, he replied. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me. No trouble, Mr. Spudmore, Hermione said happily, though that will be a 10-gallon consulting fee. George coughed, suppressing a guffaw. Harry snorted, starting to get an inkling of what she was up to. Then they could hear Ginny laughing from upstairs when he projected the look on Spudmore's face to her. Excuse me? Spudmore said. Harry said you're doing a study on the failure of the firebolt Millennium, correct? Hermione said. Oh, yes, that's correct, Professor Granger. Sales and reviews of the Millennium have been poor, and we're trying to figure out what went wrong. And you're getting a professional arithmancer's assessment on a product that's worth hundreds of gallons per unit. I'd say that's worth a 10-gallon consulting fee. Spudmore, who wasn't stupid, but wasn't used to people being quite so brisk with him, readily agreed to the consultation. He counted out 10 gallons from his coin purse and handed them to Hermione. She pocketed them. It's too fast, she said, and she turned and walked back to the fireplace, leaving Spudmore sputtering. What? That's 2 6/7 gallons per word, she said casually. That some kind of record, George? Professor Granger, the man shouted. She and George turned around, and George cracked up at the look on Spudmore's face. Ginny cackled from upstairs, though that unfortunately made baby James start fussing. I think we've let him suffer enough, don't you? George said. I suppose, she said. After all, Harry's old firebolt was a big help to us, although it did snap like a twig when hit by a 100-mile-an-hour crosswind. Best advise your buyers not to fly it in a hurricane. Right, Spudmore said in confusion. That was far outside its design specs. Harry motioned for all of them to sit again. Professor, what do you mean the Millennium is too fast? The broom-maker demanded. Hermione sat and explained. The firebolt Millennium's had a lot of complaints, hasn't it? And let me guess, the most common complaint is whiplash, followed by vertigo and an inability to control the steering. Why, yes. You've read the reviews, then? Nope, I hardly know a thing about it. Honestly, I can't even recall the top speed at the moment. Then how? Mr. Spudmore, all I needed to know about the Millennium was that the original firebolt had a top speed of 150 miles per hour, and I could have predicted these problems before the Millennium was even on the drawing board. Wait, how's that? George cut in. I think you've even lost me there, and I've got better at deciphering your stuff. Elementary, my dear Weasley, she said, winking at him. The original firebolt has a top speed of 150 miles per hour. Firebolt Millennium is presumably meant to be better, else why make a new one? It can't just be the novelty. The original was still at the top of the market, and everyone knew it. A new model with no improvements wouldn't boost sales. What improvements are these? Broomstick manufacturers like to advertise the speed of their brooms at the top, so it's probably faster. Most people think faster is better, but they don't account for g-forces, or they don't know they increase with the square of the speed. So increases in speed above 150 miles per hour are useless for Quidditch. Oh, that's a good article title. Anyway, at those speeds, there's not enough room to turn inside the Quidditch pitch, and anyone with enough skill to use the speed will hurt themselves trying, so they aren't going to enjoy the broom very much." She said all of this very fast. Randolph Spudmore, if anything, looked more confused. But, he stammered, then decided on, "Did you say it can't turn inside the Quidditch pitch? The firebolt Millennium can turn on a dime!" Hermione slowed down to answer him. "I'm sorry, I was being unclear. I'm sure the broom can turn on a dime, but humans can't. Look, the faster you fly, the greater the g-forces you have to withstand while making the turn. On a standard Quidditch pitch, the longest arc you can fit inside it, the widest possible turn, has a radius of curvature of 392 feet. I worked that out ages ago. At 150 miles per hour, you're going to be pulling nearly 4 Gs to make that turn. 4 times the force of gravity. Have you worked with measurements in Gs? Not per se. I'm familiar with forces associated with turning and acceleration. I know the basic arithmancy, but at these speeds we didn't have any models for it. We're in uncharted territory. Not to Muggles. They've gone up to 9 Gs or more. 4 Gs is already close to the limit of most people's tolerance before passing out without special clothing, and that's not counting the neck strain. You're going to get whiplash under those forces. Any faster, and a Quidditch player will pass out before they can get up to full speed. That means making the broom faster won't help on the pitch, and will only increase injuries. Better acceleration, maybe, but even there you'll need to be careful." Spudmore leaned back in his chair. "Merlin's beard," he muttered. "If we've really hit a wall in speed—" "Bloody hell!" George exclaimed. "Hermione, I think you just crashed the broomstick market." She sighed and flopped back in her chair to stare at the ceiling. "Either now or 5 or 10 years from now when everyone figures it out. Still, just in case," she smirked, "Harry, maybe you should write the article this time." "What?" 20th of July, 2002. Hermione looked out at the campground on the Tanzanian savannah. The mood here was a bit more relaxed than it was in England 8 years ago. They were far enough out that there was less pressure here to keep the statute of secrecy, with a large section of wilderness warded off and cleared of large animals and acacia trees to build the stadium. Of course, Hermione and many of the British attendees were irrationally wary of attacks by dark wizards, but everyone said security was good this year. All the other countries were being extra careful because in the last World Cup, the Senegalese Yumbos had stolen all the food in a 10-mile radius, risking a serious statute of secrecy breach and putting a number of impoverished Muggle villages at risk. Unfortunately, the British showing wasn't very good this year. Whether it was because the Quidditch League was still recovering from the war, or some other factor wasn't as clear. "I think that there are a few people who blame the bottom dropping out of the domestic broomstick market for the British teams not placing," Hermione said, noticing a handful of the looks she was getting. "Then they're stupid," George said. "It's not like it makes the brooms on the market any worse." "I still feel awkward being here." "Come on," he pulled her along. "We're just here to support Victor, especially since Harry can't make it." Harry and Ginny naturally hadn't come with a baby at home. Even if Harry might have come for a night to watch both of them, he and Ginny didn't want to be separated across continents for any length of time. They walked through the camp towards where the Bulgarian team was staying. It wasn't easy to get close to them, but Hermione's name could open up a few proverbial doors, and once they got someone to actually tell Victor who was there, he let them in at once. "Hermione," he said, "and George, thank you for coming." "Well, we didn't want to miss this after your last World Cup performance," Hermione said. "Ron, Fred, and Angelina are around here too somewhere, and Neville and Luna are on a safari north of here. I guess Newt Scamander's grandson has been running them all month. But they should be coming. Harry and Ginny send their regards, of course." "Tell them thank you as well, then," Victor said, "and congratulations for their new child." "We will," said George. "They named him after you, you know." "They named him after the date," Hermione said quickly. "Or near enough, 3rd of May." They deserve all happiness after what they have been through, Victor said with a smile. And tell Harry I am sorry I never got to face him on pitch. Oh, well, believe me, so's he, George answered. We just wanted to wish you luck in the final tonight, Hermione said. Raya Zagulu sounds like a tough opponent. Thank you, she is very skilled, but I am confident, Victor said. They stayed a little while longer before heading back to their own campsite. However, they did see one interesting sight when they found Ron talking animatedly with an Egyptian warlock about hieroglyphics. What's up, little bro? George cut in. Whatever happened to consorting with the enemy? Oh, give me a break, George. That was years ago, Ron protested. Relax, Ron. I was only joshing. Huh. If you want to know, after the mess with Barty Crouch, I reckon I ought to start studying runes and curse breaking again. The aura department could use someone who can do stuff like that in-house. You know we missed 2 latent curses on him in the initial scan? The bloke was so paranoid I think impersonating Moody rubbed off on him. But you got them all? Hermione said nervously. Pretty sure. We even had an alchemist take a look at him just in case. But that doesn't rule out curses he laid elsewhere, waiting to activate. But we'll get ahead of him, don't worry. And I'll study up to try to make sure we don't miss stuff like that again. It's actually really interesting. I'm just out of practice. Well, I'm proud of you, Ron, George said, clapping him on the shoulder. And good luck with that. The rest of the day and night passed without incident. Sadly, Egypt won the match when Victor was narrowly beaten out to the snitch by the Egyptian Seeker, but there were no dark wizard attacks and no mascots run amok this time. The villa caused a bit of a stir, but they were given strict orders to stay in line, so it was nothing but a fun international outing for once. 23rd of September 2002. Georgina looked around in amazement as Hermione led her to the control room at CERN. The facility was enormous and filled with people. As she understood things, these were nearer to Muggle unspeakables than anything else, but there were thousands of them, and an alarming number of them went by Doctor. In the control room, dozens of Muggles, most of them in casual clothes, one of them wasn't even wearing shoes, bustled about, working an array of controls and readouts that could rival the entire Department of Mysteries. One of the older Muggles greeted Hermione warmly, shaking her hand. "Thank you for having me back, Dr. Van der Werf," she said. "The pleasure is all mine, Dr. Granger." Hermione motioned to Georgina. "And this is my apprentice, Darth Maul." "What?" she said. "Really?" Van der Werf said. "Sorry, her name's Georgina Vector." Van der Werf shook Georgina's hand and led the two of them to a less busy corner of the room. She still didn't fully understand this project of Hermione's, but it was apparently so difficult that it took this place, supposedly the largest machine ever built, to make a speck of the material she was testing. Van der Werf turned out to be an in-the-know Muggle whose main contribution to the project was explaining how the thing worked. "We take the antiprotons from the antiproton decelerator and slow them down using the thin foil target, then confine them in the penning trap," he said. "Wait, shouldn't the antiprotons just crash into the foil and annihilate?" Georgina cut in. "No, Miss Vector, the antiprotons will only annihilate with atomic nuclei, and only a tiny fraction of them actually hit a nucleus, atoms being mostly empty space," he said. "The penning trap uses electrodes to confine the antiprotons in a small section of the tube, and an axial magnetic field to confine them near the axis." "Like this," Hermione said, quickly sketching out a diagram. "Okay, I think I get it," Georgina said as she studied it. "Yes, like that," Van der Werf confirmed. "The magnets are supercooled to 15 Kelvin, and the antiprotons quickly equilibrate to that temperature by Coulomb interaction once they're confined." "In simple terms, a tiny amount of hot gas in a cold container doesn't stay hot for long," Hermione explained. "Essentially, yes. Then the positrons are introduced into the trap, and another pair of electrodes confine them in a larger cloud around the antiprotons. Where they overlap, they can combine into neutral antihydrogen." He hesitated. although the vast majority of the particles are still charged. Will that be a problem, Dr. Granger? If they're at 15 Kelvin, it's not, she said. The annihilation radiation might be, but I think I can compensate for that. All right, but also I'm afraid you won't be able to get as close to the beamline as before. The antihydrogen is produced in a big detector. Yes, I know. I read the specs, Hermione said. I had some ideas for temporary detection spells that won't show anything too suspicious in the detectors, if I could run them by you. As Georgina understood it, it took a lot longer to make it work this time than before, but Hermione did find a way to take some readings of the antihydrogen. That wasn't enough for her to solve the problem on the spot, which was expected, but she was confident this would complete it. 25th of December, 2002. Christmas dinner was still held at the Burrow, as always. 2 grandchildren rather than 1, and 2 more wives, made it a bit more crowded, but not intractably so. Nadia was adorable as she squealed over baby James, and they made sure to take plenty of photos. Lots of gifts were exchanged. Harry always insisted on giving Dobby socks. The elf had quite the collection by now. However, Dobby caused quite a stir when he opened the package and said in a strange, hissing voice, "Oh, socks! We likes them, don't we, my precious?" followed by a wet coughing sound. Harry's head snapped up, and he glared at Hermione and George, trying to decide which of them was responsible for this. Hermione giggled and raised her hand. "Guilty!" He rolled his eyes. "Why do I have a feeling this isn't going to end well?" he said. "Your communication rings already look like the One Ring, if you ever make a ring of invisibility." "Why would she need a ring of invisibility?" said Percy. "She can just use the disillusionment charm." "It's a Muggle reference, Percy. Don't worry about it," she said. "You really should see more films. And Dobby, that was pretty good. The Gollum part still needs a bit of work." "Yes, my precious," Dobby said. George leaned over and whispered in her ear. "Sonia's gonna smack him silly if he tries that around her, isn't she?" "Probably." Dinner was very good. As usual, Molly worked her magic with help from various family members. Harry, in particular, had turned out to be quite good at cooking, a side effect of his unfortunate childhood, but he enjoyed it with Ginny helping. "Hermione, dear, did you ever finish that project, the one you went to Switzerland for?" Molly asked from over the table. Hermione bit her lip sheepishly. Not exactly, Molly. You see, I did complete the proof, but I had to assume strong CP symmetry." The Weasleys looked at her in confusion. Is that a problem?" said Molly. "Yes, because strong CP symmetry is explicitly wrong. I mean, all CP symmetry is wrong, but weak CP asymmetry is covered by the 6th exemption to Gamp's law." "But what is CP symmetry?" asked Ginny. "It's basically, CP asymmetry is what determines that we have matter instead of antimatter in the universe. If you assume CP symmetry, the universe should be empty." How is that useful then? I mean, "What's the use of starting a proof from a wrong assumption?" Percy finished for her. Ginny nodded emphatically. "Because the strong CP violation term is tiny," Hermione said. "I think I can fill in the gap in the proof by including it as a small correction term. I just need some better measurements to do it." Fred cocked an eyebrow at her. "But that was the biggest whatever it is in the world," he said. "How can you get better measurements than that?" "With their next generation experiment," she said. "They're barely thinking about that now. It won't be running until about 2005, but I'm almost positive that when it is, the results will come back so I can fill it in and prove antimatter really can't be transfigured."
"Well, good," Harry said. "As long as you can't build a nuke or something." He saw the uncomfortable look on her face and dropped his fork. "Hermione, please tell me you can't build a nuke." She shook her head.
"It would be a bit hit or miss. And I'd need to find a uranium mine. Yes. If I had free rein to test them, I could do it in a few weeks. Didn't my parents ever mention that? I'm sure I told them.
No, it never came up, Harry said.
What's this? Arthur cut in. You're talking about Muggle nuclear bombs? How does that work exactly?
Maybe better if you don't know, Arthur, Harry said, and Hermione had to agree, just in case he said something unfortunate in the wrong place in the Muggle world.
A bomb that can destroy a whole city, Hermione said. Muggle thing. Luckily they're very difficult to make.
Supposed to be very difficult to make if your name isn't Hermione Granger, Harry grumbled. Could someone else do that?
Hermione shrugged. I can't see why anyone would want to, but I suppose so. Not many people would have the technical knowledge and the knowledge of how to magically enrich uranium, but it might be something to look into. I'll write a letter to the ICW asking them about it. If no one's done it in the past 60 years, it's not urgent, though.
Fine, he said, but I'm going to hold you to that.